about to say before I decided to be a comedian is is that we have music like this all the time. This is not just Mother's Day special occasion. We are so blessed. We are so blessed with our fabulous, fabulous music. Would you hand me my clicker? Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Would you breathe with me, please? Take it in and release. And again and release. And one more time, deep in. And let it out audibly. Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. So I thought about naming my talk Mommy Dearest. Not because I had a mom like Joan Crawford in the movie, but because I actually had a very dear mother. That's my mom, Shirley. She's been gone for just about 14 years, and I can honestly say I miss her every single day. Now, was she the perfect mom? No. But she was perfect for me, if you know what I mean. Who she was and who she wasn't was perfect for helping me to become who I am and who I am not. So that's part of what I want to talk about today, how our moms, with all of their perfections and all of their imperfections, so deeply influenced and molded who we are today. In fact, Abraham Lincoln said, "All that I am or ever hope to be, I owe to my angel mother." Now, I realize that not everyone had an angel mother. I get that. But I do know that, however, even if your mom was Mommy Dearest, that who you are is part of who she was. She was an integral part of who you are, the character that you have, the makeup that you are. So if you like the person that you are, and I certainly hope that you do, then today is the day to celebrate and to think about your mom for being the person, perfect and imperfect, that she was. So I'm going to ask you to just take a moment right now and experience a sense of gratitude for your mom. Did you feel what happened in the room just then? Just energetically, it just kind of swelled. That it kind of expanded, didn't it? Even if ours was not a mother that we necessarily got along with, that love of mothers is still with us. So in addition to celebrating moms, and we're going to talk about moms quite a bit today, we're also going to talk about the divine feminine, that nurturing, creative, life-giving, loving aspect of the universe. Because as we talk about almost every single week, we live in an intelligent universe. And this intelligent universe acts and creates intelligently. It is an orderly universe. Things happen in a very particular and a very beautiful and almost always seems to work out order. Yes? Would you agree with me? So if you really think about the act of becoming a mother is evidence of that intelligence. And no, I'm not just talking about the biology, although that's intelligent also. Think about what has happened when you have observed a woman become a mother. She changes, doesn't she? There's something that happens with the birth of a child. Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh said, "The moment a child is born, the mother is also born. She never existed before. The woman existed, but the mother never. A mother is something absolutely new." So I want you to think about that. As the child is the child is being born, the mother is being born as well. And what's so cool about it is, this shows the ever expansion of the universe, is that it happens every time a new mother is born, every time a new child is born, even if she has other children. I had a friend who was pregnant with her second child, and she was really, really concerned that she was not going to be able to love her second child as much as she did her first child. And she really, really was expressing that. She was worried that she wouldn't have the capacity to love as much with the second child as she did with the first child. And of course, as you know, just the opposite happened. She loved her second and her third child every bit as much as she did the first. It was different because she was different, but her well of love never ran dry, because how could it? Love is eternal. Love is non-ending, and it goes and it goes and it goes, and it expands when it's shared. Are you all with me on this? Yeah? Is this making sense? Okay, good. Now, I'm not just talking about women who have actually physically given birth to a child. I'm talking about women. I'm talking about all of us. I've never had a child, but you know I love my 2 cats and my dog, right? And I love these kids that show up here. And so I'm not talking about just women who have given birth. I'm talking about women in general who love and nurture others. I'm talking about adopted moms and foster moms and grandmoms and cool aunts and mom dogs and teachers and friends. And the reason why I want to make that very, very clear to all of us is that the divine feminine knows itself. By means of us, we have that capacity to share our love. Here's how Ernest Holmes put it. He said, the biggest life is the one that gives the most, loves the most, includes the most, has the greatest understanding and the greatest consciousness of eternal good, and redistributes this good to the largest number of people. So that limitless capacity to love is one of the feminine aspects of the divine. The limitless capacity to love is a feminine aspect of God. Now, of course, we know that honoring the divine feminine is nothing new. Historically and spiritually speaking, cultures throughout history have revered the sacred feminine. Because females, whether they're human or whether they are animal, females give birth. They provide life. Think about that. We know what happens, right? We know how it happens. We know the biology of it. But imagine thousands of years ago when nobody knew about the birds and the bees. Imagine how mystical, how magical the female must have seemed, that they could give birth. No wonder they were worshipped as goddesses. Women, all of you, you are goddesses. You are goddesses. You are the divine feminine. But what happened, and this is the culture that we were all born into, what happened was there was a time, I had another quote. Wait, I got to go to Joseph Campbell, and then I'll explain about goddesses. Joseph Campbell said the woman gives birth, the human woman gives birth, just as the earth gives birth to the plants. She gives nourishment as the plants do. So woman magic and earth magic are the same. They are related. Here's what happened, though. Things changed according to what Joseph Campbell wrote about, is that after a while, cultures stopped living off the land, and they began to become more civilized. And because they were no longer getting all of their nourishment and all of their nurturing from the land and working with the land, the reverence for the female, the reverence for that giving of life diminished. what happened was they became especially in our culture, the Judeo-Christian culture, is they became monotheistic, which means one God. And that one God happened to look like Abraham or Charlton Heston, if you've seen the movie. You know, it looked like Moses, right? But one God, and it was a male, and it became a patriarchy. This is what we were born into. But the problem is that things swung so far in the other direction. And in many religions, not only were women no longer revered for the goddesses that we are, any reference to goddess, any reference to anything like that was considered witchcraft. And so women were powerful, wise women were tortured and put to death out of ignorance and fear. And that has been the culture that we have moved through for several hundreds of years. But I would like to think that that's changed. I would like to think that the pendulum is swinging back. I would like to think that we are giving birth to a new age. We're not there yet. We are not there yet, but I believe that we are returning to balance between the feminine and the masculine and honoring both sides because we are one. We are one. Ernest Holmes said this: Spirit is the Father, Mother, God, because it is the principle of unity back of all things. The masculine and the feminine principles both come from the one. Spirit is all, the center and circumference of everything that exists. There is no separation, the perfect balance, the feminine and the masculine, the yin and the yang. That is natural. And it's impulse, that which moves it forward. Its impulse is love. So today we are going to further celebrate the divine feminine at the same time that we're launching the urban farm. Did you get the connection? Get it? I planned it that way. But I want to share a story with you. It's a beautiful, beautiful story. It's from one of the Chicken Soup for the Soul books. Remember those? Mark Victor Hansen? Yeah. It is a testimony to beauty and wisdom and intelligence and unconditional love that was being expressed as a grandmother. That divine love, that divine feminine. So just sit back because I'm going to tell you a story. Once upon a time, I heard a ding. Somebody liked that, hey? Ding. Grandma Lou was the undisputed gardener in our family, for she had come of age in the Depression when she learned to use every old thing twice. And when it was worn out, she'd use it again in her garden. As she had for my older sister's weddings, Grandma Lou gave my sister Jenny a mason jar layered with seeds from her garden. Round and round the colorful spread of the seeds curled in the fat mouth jar. Heavy beans in rich, deep earth tones held the bottom steady. Next came the corn kernels, polished in cheesecloth until they gleamed like gold. Flat seeds of cucumber, squash, and watermelon filled the upper reaches, interspersed with the feathery dots of marigolds. Then came the finer herb seeds of mint and basil. And finally, seeds for flowers to bring beauty to the garden, as well as nourishment. The jar was crowned with a gleaming brass lid and a cheerful ribbon. There was a lifetime supply of seeds into that jar, a whole garden's worth of food for the new couple. 2 years later, Grandma Lou suffered a stroke and forced her into assisted living. And though she was unable to attend my own wedding that year, I was delighted to see a mason jar among the brightly wrapped gifts at my reception. But unlike its predecessors, my jar held no graceful pattern of seeds. Instead, it was a haphazard blend, as if all the seeds had been put into a pillowcase and then poured into the jar. Even the lid seemed like an afterthought, for it was rusty and well worn. But considering Grandma Lou's state of health, I felt blessed that she remembered the gentle tradition at all. My husband Mark found work in the city, and we moved to a small apartment. A garden was all but impossible, so I consoled myself by placing the seed jar in our living room. And there it stood as a promise to someday return to the garden. By the time our sons were toddlers, I'd moved the seed jar to the top of the refrigerator where their curious little hands couldn't tip it over. Eventually, we moved to a house, but there still wasn't enough sun in our yard to plant a real garden. After the boys were grown, we spent our quiet evenings planning a little place in the country where Mark could fish and I could finally have a proper garden. A year later, Mark was hit by a drunk driver, paralyzing him from the neck down. Between the hospital visits and the financial worries, I was exhausted. Soon Mark would be coming home, and at half his size, I knew that I wouldn't be able to lift him into the bed. I didn't know what I would do. We couldn't afford a day nurse, let alone full-time help, and assisted living apartments were way out of our range. One night, my sister Jenny arrived with dinner, and she chatted cheerfully as we set the table. But when she asked about Mark, I broke into tears, explaining how he'd be home soon and how tight our money was. She offered her modest savings, even offered to move in, but I knew Mark's pride wouldn't allow it. After dinner, as we were cleaning up, Jenny saw the seed jar on the top of the refrigerator. "What's this?" she asked as she reached for it. I looked up from the sink and I said, "Oh, that's just Grandma Lou's seed jar. You know, we all got one for our weddings, remember?" And Jenny looked at me and she said, "You mean you never opened it?" "Well, I never had a patch of soil good enough to have a garden." Jenny tucked the jar in her arm and she said, "Come here, you have to see this." Half dragging me, we went back to the dining room table, and it took 3 tries, and she tried to open that lid, and finally it opened, and she overturned the seeds onto the thing, and I'm like, "What are you doing?" Scrambling to catch the seeds, and an envelope slipped out from the seed jar. Jenny plucked up the envelope and handed it to me, and she said, "Open this," with a smile. Inside, I found 5 stock certificates, one for each one $100 shares. Reading the world-famous company names, our eyes widened with recognition. "Do you have any idea what these are worth now?" she said. I gathered a handful of seeds, and I said a silent prayer of thanks to Grandma Lou, who had been tending a garden for me all these years behind the scenes. So maybe your mom didn't leave you a seed jar full of stock certificates. Maybe you think all she gave you was weeds. But you know and I know the people we are today, the beautiful, loving, living, flawed yet perfect expressions of light, I am light, that we are due in part to the divine goddess who gave birth to us. And the divine goddess says, in the form of all women, who continue to nurture and nourish us. As you heard earlier, we're launching our second urban farm today. Last year we sold out, first day. So I'm going to encourage you that if you want that good, fresh produce to nurture and nourish you and your loved ones, buy a share in memory of your mom today. I do love you. I do love you so. Thank you for letting me be the mom of the center. Happy Mother's Day, and so it is.